I never thought betrayal would feel like this. Not the kind you see in movies. Not the screaming or throwing plates. But that quiet, brutal kind that lands like a knife straight into your chest. When Rachel, my best friend for almost 20 years, looked me in the eye and told me she was pregnant with my husband's child, I swear I stopped breathing. At first, I thought she was joking, or maybe I'd misunderstood. I even tried to laugh it off, until she slid a test result across the table. The letters on the page blurred, not because I couldn't read, but because my hands were shaking so hard I thought the paper might rip in two. "Emily," she said softly, like she was delivering bad news to a stranger. "It's David's. We've been seeing each other for months. He loves me. He's going to leave you." David, my husband of 5 years, the man I shared a home, a bed, a life with, and Rachel, my Rachel, the friend I'd pulled out of the darkest corners of her childhood, the one I invited to every Thanksgiving when she had nowhere else to go, the one who laughed with me through college nights on cheap pizza and beer. I thought I knew her. I thought she was family. Turns out, she was the knife. The craziest part, that same morning, I had learned I was pregnant too. My baby, David's baby, our baby. I'd been planning to surprise him over dinner, maybe make it a sweet memory we could laugh about later. But sitting there with Rachel, hearing her say those words, I felt something inside me collapse. I should have screamed. I should have called her every name under the sun, maybe even slapped her. But I didn't. Instead, I asked the only question I could get past my throat. "Does he know?" Rachel nodded, almost smug. "He does. He said he'll leave you. He wants to give me and the baby a real family." "Emily, I'm sorry. But, you know he hasn't loved you for a long time. You must feel it. Why keep dragging out something that's already dead?" Dead, that's what she called my marriage. I don't remember how I got home. I just remember standing in the doorway, listening to David on the phone. His voice was soft, tender in a way he hadn't spoken to me in years. "You don't have to worry," he said. "I'll talk to her. This isn't your fault. I'll take care of it." It was Rachel on the other end. I knew it before he even hung up. When he finally looked up and saw me, he didn't bother to deny it. He didn't fumble or lie. He just looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm with Rachel. She's pregnant. I want a divorce." No hesitation, no shame, just like that. 8 years together, 5 as husband and wife, 3 as college sweethearts, collapsed with a single sentence. I wanted to tell him I was pregnant too. I wanted to shove the test result into his hands and watch him squirm. I wanted to ask him who he would choose then, but the words got stuck somewhere deep in my throat because I already knew the answer. David didn't fight. He didn't plead. He offered me the house, some money, like he was settling a business deal. "It's not about you," he said, cold and steady. "We just don't work anymore. You'll be fine. You'll be fine, God." If I had $1 for every time a man told a woman she'd be fine after breaking her heart, I'd be rich enough to buy an island and never see another living soul again. The divorce was fast, paper signed, rings off, and suddenly I was alone in a house that didn't even feel like mine anymore. And the baby, I couldn't keep it. Not like this. Not when every look, every moment, would remind me of David and Rachel. So I walked into a clinic one gray morning and walked out empty, hollow, and bleeding in a way no one could see. I quit my job 2 weeks later. Marketing campaigns and endless meetings didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. Then came his mother. Oh, his mother, God bless her. She never liked me. She came by unannounced, wagging her finger at the dust on the shelves, at the dishes in the sink. "No wonder David strayed," she snapped. "You can't even keep a home." That was the day I told her, "We're divorced. This is my house now. Your son lives somewhere else." Her face turned red. She stormed out, muttering under her breath. But I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to strength. I sold the house. Too many ghosts in those walls. Too many nights I lay awake listening to silence that used to be filled with laughter. The night before I left the city, I mailed David the ultrasound picture he never saw. No note. Just that. Let him wonder. Let him feel, for just a second, the weight I carried alone. Then I packed what little I cared to keep and drove back to my hometown. A small, dusty place in the Midwest where people knew each other's business before you even finished doing it. My parents weren't thrilled to see me. My grandmother muttered that she'd told me not to marry so far away, that no man ever truly stays. My mother tried to hide the pity in her eyes. My father just stayed quiet, like he always did. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to stay. I booked a room at the only halfway decent hotel in town. I told myself I'd figure things out later, find a new job. Maybe even a new city anywhere but here. That afternoon, as I dragged my suitcase across the hotel parking lot, I heard someone call my name, Emily. I turned, squinting against the sun. A tall man stood by a pickup truck, his hands shading his eyes. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Then it clicked. Michael Turner, my quiet, serious high school classmate. The one who always had his head buried in books, who never quite fit in but never seemed to care. And just like that, the past I thought I'd buried cracked wide open. Michael hadn't changed much, not really. He still had that quiet steadiness about him, the kind of presence that makes you feel calmer just by standing next to him. But he wasn't the skinny boy with a buzz cut anymore. He'd filled out, broad shoulders under a flannel shirt, the kind of man you could lean on without worrying he might break. Michael Turner, I said, shaking my head with a laugh. I can't believe it. Emily Parker, he replied, smiling. It's been, what, 15 years? Don't remind me, I groaned. Even though a small part of me was glad someone still remembered my name, we stood there awkwardly for a moment, two grown adults who used to be kids in the same dusty classrooms, trying to bridge a decade and a half of silence. He offered to give me a ride into town. I almost said no. I'd gotten used to doing everything alone, but something about the way he said it, casual but kind, made me accept. In the truck, he asked about my life. I didn't sugarcoat it. Married, divorced, back in town for a bit, that's about it. He didn't flinch. Didn't offer pity or empty words. He just nodded. Sometimes starting over is the best thing you can do. That night, I lay awake in the hotel, thinking about those words, starting over. I wasn't sure I knew how. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I kept running into each other. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop, once at the farmer's market, where he was buying apples and I was pretending I still knew how to cook. Finally, he admitted he'd moved back about a year ago, after working in Chicago for a long time, needed space, he said. City life just wore me out. I understood that more than I cared to admit. We started having coffee together, first by accident, then on purpose. He was easy to be around. He didn't ask for details about David, though he must have heard the gossip. Small towns thrive on gossip. He just let me talk when I wanted to and stayed quiet when I didn't. One evening, he showed up outside the hotel with 2 takeout boxes. I ordered too much Chinese, he said, which was a lie, but a kind one. We ate together on the hood of his truck, watching the sun set over the grain silos. It felt normal. God, I'd forgotten what normal even was. Then came the phone call. Emily? The voice was tired, hoarse, but unmistakable. David? My stomach turned. I hadn't heard from him in months. I thought I'd buried that part of my life. What do you want? I snapped. I just wanted to hear your voice, he said, almost whispering. Are you back in town? I went by the house and the house isn't mine anymore. I cut him off. I sold it. And you have no reason to call me. Silence. Then, I miss you. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You miss me? Where's Rachel? Doesn't she keep you busy enough? More silence. Then he hung up. I blocked the number, but that night, I couldn't sleep. His voice stayed with me. Not because I missed him, but because I realized he was unraveling, and some ugly part of me thought, good. Now he knows what it feels like. A week later, Rachel showed up. Yes, Rachel, standing outside the hotel, looking thinner than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes wild. You think you won? She hissed the second I opened the door. You think just because you left? Just because you mailed him that stupid picture, that you get to play the victim? I froze. What are you talking about? She laughed, high and bitter. I know you weren't pregnant. You just wanted to mess with his head. But guess what? I wasn't pregnant either. My chest tightened. You lied to him? About the baby? She stepped closer, her face twisted. You think you're so perfect, Emily, always the good girl, always the one everyone loves. I wanted to take something from you, and I did. I took David. I made you crawl back here with your tail between your legs. She was trembling, her hands shaking so badly I thought she might collapse right there. For the first time, I didn't see a rival or a traitor. I saw someone broken, eaten alive by her own jealousy. But that didn't mean I forgave her. You need help, I said quietly. Real help, from a doctor. Not from David, and sure as hell not from me. Her eyes flashed with hate. Stay out of my life. Stay away from him. Then she stormed off, leaving me shaking. Michael found me sitting on the curb later, hugging my knees like a teenager. He didn't ask what happened. He just sat down beside me. Close enough that our shoulders touched. After a long silence, I whispered, "Do you ever feel like the people you trust most are the ones who cut the deepest?" He looked at me, his eyes steady, all the time. "That's why you have to be careful who you let close." I didn't realize I was crying until he reached over and brushed a tear off my cheek. His hand was warm, steady. I leaned into it, just for a second, before pulling away. "I'm not ready," I admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "That's okay," he said. "I'll wait." And for the first time in months, I believed someone, but David wasn't done. He found a way around the block number, calling from different phones, leaving messages I refused to answer. "Emily, please, Rachel's not who I thought she was. I made a mistake. We can fix this." Fix this. As if marriage was a broken chair you could glue back together. I deleted every message, but the anger simmered. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he'd destroyed something that could never be rebuilt, but another part of me knew silence hurt him more. One night, Michael and I were walking back from dinner when we saw headlights in the hotel parking lot. A car idling, the driver's face half hidden. "David?" My heart slammed against my ribs. Michael stepped in front of me, protective in a way David never was. "What are you doing here?" Michael asked sharply. David's voice cracked. "I just wanted to talk to her." "Well, she doesn't want to talk to you," Michael shot back. "So leave." I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. I was angry, furious, actually. I stepped out from behind Michael and stared straight at David. "You don't get to stalk me. You don't get to call me. You don't get anything from me. Not now, not ever." He flinched like I'd slapped him. For a moment, I saw the man I used to love, standing there broken and lost. But then I remembered Rachel's smug smile, his cold words, the ultrasound I mailed him, and I walked away. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. David and Rachel weren't my story anymore. They were a cautionary tale, a ghost I'd already buried. My story, the one I still had the power to write, was standing right next to me, holding out takeout boxes, brushing away my tears, waiting for me to let him in. Michael. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to try. Falling for Michael didn't happen all at once. It wasn't some wild, head over heels kind of thing like I'd had with David. It was slower, steadier, like rain soaking into dry earth. At first, it was just dinners, walks in the evening, coffee runs that turned into hours of talking about nothing and everything. Then one Saturday, he showed up at the hotel with a set of paint samples. "You're not planning to live here forever, are you?" he asked, glancing around the bland beige walls. "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't figured out what's next." He set the samples down with a grin. "Then let's figure it out together." That was the beginning of the cafe idea. I'd always loved coffee shops, the smell of roasted beans, the quiet hum of people working or laughing together. Back in the city, I used to dream about opening my own place. But with David, it was always someday when we had the money, someday when things slowed down, someday that never came. Now, with Michael's encouragement, someday started looking like today. We found a small storefront on Main Street, dusty but full of charm. The rent was cheap, which meant it needed work. Michael rolled up his sleeves and said, "Guess we've got ourselves a project." There were days when I wanted to quit. Days when the plumbing didn't cooperate, when the paint dried uneven, when the bank made me feel like a child asking permission. But Michael never wavered. He was there with a hammer in one hand and takeout in the other, steady as a rock, and slowly, the place started to look like mine. Like me. Meanwhile, David kept circling my life like a storm I refused to acknowledge. I'd hear about him through town gossip, how Rachel followed him to work, how she showed up at his office in tears, how she accused him of cheating if he so much as looked at another woman. One afternoon, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked awful, hollow eyes, a few pounds lighter. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. "Emily," he said, his voice cracking, "can we talk?" "No," I answered simply, pushing my cart past him. But he followed me down the aisle. "I made a mistake. She's not well. I should have seen it sooner. We can fix this. We can go back." I stopped and turned, meeting his eyes with a coldness I didn't know I had. "There's no back. You broke that bridge and set it on fire." And I walked away from the ashes. The look on his face, like he was just realizing the finality, almost broke me. Almost, but not quite. I pushed my cart away and didn't look back. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed to unravel completely. Word spread that she'd been caught screaming at David in a restaurant, throwing a glass of water in his face. People whispered about late-night shouting matches, about police being called to their apartment once or twice. Part of me wanted to gloat. She'd stolen my husband, and now she was choking on the poison she'd poured herself. But another part of me pitied her. She was lost, clinging to a man who never really loved her, terrified of ending up alone. But pity didn't mean forgiveness. Back at the cafe, life was starting to feel different. Real. Mine opening day was chaos: burnt scones, a broken espresso machine, a line out the door. I thought I'd collapse by noon. But somehow, by closing time, I was smiling. People loved the place. They loved me. That night, Michael and I sat on the counter, sharing a piece of cake that hadn't sold. My hair was a mess, my apron covered in coffee stains, but I felt lighter than I had in years. "You did it," he said, bumping my shoulder with his. "I'm proud of you." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who'd been beside me through every stumble and victory, who never once asked for anything in return. For the first time since David, I felt my heart open just a little. Still, I was cautious. Some nights, fear crept in like an old habit. What if he left too? What if all men eventually did? Michael seemed to sense it without me saying a word. He never pushed, never demanded. He just showed up, again and again, proving with actions what words never could. One evening, he handed me a small box. Not a ring, thank God, not yet, but a key to my place, he said simply. No pressure, just, in case you ever want to stay. I held it in my palm, the metal warm from his hand. It wasn't about the apartment. It was about trust, about choice. I took a deep breath and slid it onto my keyring. David tried one last time. He showed up at the cafe, unshaven, desperate. Customers whispered as he begged me to hear him out. "Emily, please." She tricked me. She lied about the baby. "She's driving me insane. I need you. We can start over." I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, clear and firm, "David, I don't love you anymore." That's the beginning and the end of this story. He stood there for a long moment, like he couldn't process the words. Then he walked out, shoulders slumped. That was the last time I saw him. Rachel's spiral ended predictably. She left town after a messy breakup, screaming that everyone was against her. Rumor had it she moved to another state, chasing some new man. I didn't care enough to check. For the first time in years, my past wasn't clawing at my heels. Months later, business at the cafe was good, life was good, and Michael was everything I hadn't known I needed. One crisp autumn evening, he closed the shop with me. We locked the doors, turned off the lights, and stepped into the cool night air. Then he stopped, turned to me, and reached into his pocket. I froze. It wasn't a ring box. Not yet. Just a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me, smiling. "Don't freak out, just read." I opened it. It was a list, our future plans. The title said in his messy handwriting, Number 1, build something together. Number 2, travel anywhere you want. Number 3, grow old side by side. At the bottom, in all caps, one day, marry you. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "Michael, I know you're not ready," he said quickly. "I just want you to know I am, whenever you are. No rush, no pressure." For once, I didn't feel fear. I felt safe, and for the first time in a long, long time, I started to believe in forever again. By the time spring rolled around, the cafe had become more than just a business. It was my anchor. People came not just for the coffee, but for the atmosphere: warm lights, mismatched chairs, shelves filled with donated books. Some brought laptops, others brought kids. There was laughter, chatter, even quiet corners for people who just needed space. Every time I unlocked the doors in the morning, I felt a swell of pride. This was mine, not something tied to a man, not a piece of someone else's dream. Mine. Michael was there almost every day, fixing whatever broke, carrying heavy bags of beans, making terrible latte art that still made customers laugh. He called himself the unofficial handyman/mascot. I just called him mine. David, on the other hand, had become a ghost in town. I'd hear whispers he'd lost his job, that Rachel had drained his bank account before she left, that he spent nights at the bar, nursing a drink until closing. One afternoon, I saw him sitting outside that same bar, his head in his hands. For a moment, I considered walking over. Part of me still had the instinct to help, to fix, to comfort, but I didn't. I walked past. Because his choices were his own, and so were mine. Rachel vanished completely. Some said she ran off to Florida with a new man, others swore she'd checked herself into some clinic. I didn't care to find out. All I knew was that the girl who once sat across from me, eating pizza on dorm room floors, was gone. Maybe she'd been gone long before the betrayal, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. Life, though, was good, better than good. On the cafe's 1-year anniversary, we threw a little party, balloons, cookies shaped like coffee cups, a local musician strumming a guitar in the corner. Michael gave a short, awkward speech that made everyone laugh. "I'm just proud of her," he said, gesturing to me. "She built this with her own 2 hands. I just held the ladder sometimes." People clapped. I blushed. And when I looked at him, I saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't just proud of the calf. He was proud of me. That night, after the party, we walked home under string lights that crossed Main Street. I could feel him fidgeting beside me, like he wanted to say something. When we got to my apartment, he stopped, reached into his pocket. This time, it was a ring box. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I know what you've been through. I know trust doesn't come easy anymore, and I'm not asking you to forget your past, or to pretend it never happened. I'm just asking you to let me be your future." He opened the box. A simple gold band, no flashy diamonds, no extravagance, just something solid, enduring. Like him, my chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warmer, hope. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who sobbed on the bathroom floor after signing divorce papers, who felt hollow walking out of that clinic, who thought her life was over. And then I thought about the woman I'd become, the one who owned a calf, who built a new home in a small town, who found love in the arms of a man who never tried to control or diminish her. I realized I wasn't saying yes to Michael alone. I was saying yes to myself, to my growth, to my survival, to my future. "Yes," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Yes, Michael." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and when he kissed me, it wasn't like starting over. It was like starting right where I was meant to be. Our wedding wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. Just family, friends, a backyard strung with lights, tables filled with homemade food. I wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, and Michael wore the suit he swore he'd had since college. When I walked down the aisle, I saw my mother crying, my father smiling quietly, even my grandmother dabbing her eyes though she'd never admit it. And at the end of that aisle was Michael, waiting with the same steady patience he'd shown me from the very start. We said our vows, nothing flowery, nothing rehearsed, just promises we meant. And when the music played and people clapped, I felt something inside me settle, not like the ending of a story, like the beginning of one. I heard later that David had shown up, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching from afar. He didn't approach, didn't cause a scene, just stood there, silent, before walking away. Maybe that was his goodbye. Maybe it was his punishment to see what he'd thrown away. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore. Years later, when people asked me how I found the strength to move on, I never gave them the whole story. I didn't talk about the betrayal or the heartbreak or the nights I thought I'd never get up again. I just said, sometimes life breaks you apart, so you can put yourself back together the right way. And that's exactly what I did. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is my channel. The tales I share, drawn from life or woven from imagination, are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength. If you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions, subscribe to my channel. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.